Welcome, welcome. Really happy to be able to do this again in 2022, and certainly the Community Engagement Department is happy to be working with each of you and your ministry units to support Pathway of Hope across the territory. So grateful that you've taken this time and committed to this ongoing learning and professional development. I know this one's going to be really valuable for you today. As we work through this session, if you're able, we'd love to have cameras on. It's great to see each other and to feel like we're part of a learning environment, that we're all together in a classroom of sorts, even if it's virtual. So please do use your camera if you're able. We're going to do more so questions at the end. So if you have questions, please use the chat function. If Brad says something during the presentation that you want to follow up on, jump into that chat window and leave it there. We will go through all the questions as we go. He may also ask at some points if you have questions, and then you can feel free to jump in there as well. So I will just go straight into introducing our presenter. He is Bradley Harris, MSW MBA, currently the Assistant Divisional Social Services Secretary for the Ontario Division. Bradley's been working with the Salvation Army for more than 25 years, developing, managing, and supporting programs that respond to the needs of those experiencing poverty and homelessness. Currently, Bradley supports the Ontario Division in providing leadership and oversight of the social services ministry within the province. His interests include the application of the concepts of customer service to sheltering ministries and the equipping of frontline providers with the tools to ensure effective programming through program planning and evaluation. So Bradley has a lot of experience in social services and also with the Salvation Army, and I think his presentation is going to be really informative and support us as we do this Pathway of Hope work across the territory. So I will turn it over to you, Bradley, to provide any further introduction, and we can get this presentation going.
Thank you for that introduction. Thank you for throwing in some chat room information there where some of the people are from. In my capacity of working with the Ontario Division, I do have a couple of ministry units that use the Pathway of Hope. And so I'm able to kind of see from that perspective some of the good work that is happening as it comes to Pathway of Hope. Also, whenever I'm in a setting somewhere, Claire always makes sure that I'm aware of how the Pathway of Hope is going and the good work that's happening across the territory. So it's good to have all of you here today. I will share with you some thoughts on systems theory. So it's kind of one of those things where maybe you did it while you were, doing social work in school. Maybe you've read something about it here and there. Something I think that we often do in our work, but it's not something that we're always either aware of or conscious of, or even looking to see how we can use it in our practice. So when I was asked if I would be able to join you today, I just realized that the first slide says June 25th, 2022. I'm looking into the future, and I'm thinking that you guys will probably maybe understand this and get this as it comes around June, but we'll start it off with some groundwork here as we go. I want to start off just by sharing just this one slide. For anybody in Toronto or anybody who's drives along Queen Street East, there's this one bridge that just goes over the Don Valley Parkway. And when I was working with the shelters in downtown Toronto, I would often take this route. And the thing that strikes me, I guess, is the saying that's written across the top of it. This river I step in is not the river I stand in. And it's just a reminder of just the constant change that we deal with in life, in our work, in everything that we do. And, we may think that we understand everything that's going on in the environment. We may be processing things as we go about our daily work. But the river that we step in is constantly changing. The water's flowing around us. The environment continues to change. And even though we may be the same individuals as we step in, things continue to change and things continue to move. And it's up to us to kind of recognize and respond to that in each of our situations. And it helps, I think, kind of even just the thought process as we go through today's presentation. Hopefully it's no more surprising for you than it is for me on some of these things like June 25th, but I'll get over it. We're going to just breaking it down, the presentation, looking at systems theory, talking a little bit from a theoretical standpoint, moving into how I use systems theory in the work that I was doing in the shelter system in Toronto, and how we can apply it to the work that we do wherever you happen to be. Then kind of shifting gears and looking at systems thinking, thinking like a system, and kind of taking some of those ideas and giving thought to how we can apply it to the work that we do. And then looking at the system in action, and just providing a resource, sharing a resource that we used to use that's still being used in some of the programs that I've worked with, but it's called the Outcome Star. And it's a resource that if you're familiar with, it's just a review. If you're not familiar with it, I've shared a copy of the user manual with Matt, and he can provide that to you all as well, so you have a resource to take away with. But we use that in the Toronto shelters as well. So what is systems theory? Systems theory is a theory of interacting processes and the way they influence each other over time to permit the continuity of some larger whole. The key concept of systems theory, regardless of which discipline it's being applied to, is that the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. When it's applied to social work, systems theory is a practice that enables professionals to look holistically at a client's conditions and the environmental factors to gain a better understanding of why they may face the issues that they do. And it's in evaluating individuals' behaviors as it relates to the many factors within their life that can be complicated, but social workers need to look at the systems, need to look at the individuals and help put the puzzle pieces together. So very much, I think, in the work that we do, we come across situations from time to time where, you know, we have to kind of look beyond just either the individual as they're presenting themselves, and we have to look to the environment and understand how the environment is influencing and how the environment is working with them. And looking at other systems as well. When we're talking about the environment, it's not just, you know, the closeness of some pieces, but larger pieces as well. We're working with a number of systems in our everyday work and in our everyday lives. And it's really taking the time to understand how the individual that we work with is influenced by those systems and by everything else that's going on. And similarly, even looking at the individual, recognizing that there's a lot going on in individuals as well. Just this morning, I was talking with somebody and they were talking about a situation that happened and just the influence that had happened from a previous experience that had taken place. And without even understanding how that previous experience affected them, it suddenly took on a whole new understanding as to why the person is responding and dealing the way that they are now, understanding what's happened in the past, understanding how that trauma in this situation maybe laid dormant for a while, but then in a new situation here, it's kind of come to light and it's kind of created, you know, some challenges that the ministry unit is working through at this point in time. So we're constantly dealing with, you know, new information and new environment, new situations that people are dealing with, and we want to be able to support them and work with them the best that we can. So it's kind of like baking a cake. Systems theory, if we're looking at it in a very real sense, maybe not making a cake like this. This happened to be my son's birthday cake for his 6th birthday. He said to his mother that he wanted an Angry Birds cake, so made him one. I think that's a whole other presentation to go into how do you get about having a cake such as this. But when we're thinking about from, you know, just the whole being greater than its parts, when we break down what a cake is, You can understand it as the various ingredients that go into making a cake. If you were to take all the ingredients out as you're looking at a recipe and lay them out on a counter, you would get, you know, a whole bunch of different systems or a whole bunch of different ingredients. And it's really as you combine those ingredients, as you combine those parts, and you go through the process with the heat, with, you know, just the extra processes that go on with things, then you eventually get to a place where you have this cake. Obviously, when you start to look at the fondant, you start to look at how something like this could be created. There's a few other processes that go into place. But thinking about a cake, the cake is whole. It is the whole of the cake is greater than the sum of its parts. By themselves, those pieces are, you know, eggs and sugar and flour. They're not necessarily a cake, but when we finish the process, we see it for what it really is. There's also, I guess, an understanding that goes into it as to what the celebration piece is or what the purpose is for the cake. In this situation, it was a birthday party, and, you know, people were able to interact with it in such. There was a celebration that went along with it. And then even looking beyond that, we understand that there's relationships involved, whether it's people sitting down to eat cake together, to celebrate a party together, or even in the process of this, my son's mother being able to take the time and prepare this for him. And even when I showed him this picture and I said, I'm using this in a presentation yesterday, he was like, oh yeah, that was great. He said the best thing was none of his friends wanted to eat any of the Angry Birds. So that became his snack for probably the next 2 or 3 weeks. He would just kind of sit down to a fondant Angry Bird. Not maybe the healthiest of choices, but, you know, if we're using systems theory, maybe we can break it down and realize that, you know, there's a lifelong of therapy that comes after eating all that fondant as well. The other things that we're thinking of when we're looking at systems theory as a whole is some of the concepts that we apply, whether it be from you know, psychology, sociology, social work. I did an undergraduate degree in sociology, so probably the first time I started getting some of that information, and then when I did my social work degree as well. But the system, an entity that's made up of interrelated, interdependent parts, complex system, the greater, you know, the whole system made up of individual smaller systems, generally used in social sciences. Ecological systems, which we'll take a look at in a minute, just the various systems in an individual's life that influence their behaviors. Homeostasis, the state of steady conditions within a system, and the system is always moving towards homeostasis as it is set up as well. Adaptation, systems' tendency to make changes that will protect itself when presented with new environmental factors, and being able to adapt is an important part of dealing with systems. And the feedback loop, when the outputs of the system ultimately affect its inputs, causing the system to feed back into itself circularly. So looking at the cake again, if we're looking at it as the, you know, the complex system itself, and then understanding the pieces that kind of come together to make it what it is. So as I mentioned, the ecological model, this may be something that people are familiar with. This is kind of the idea that came together by Bronfenbrenner to kind of look at how things influence and how we can work with the systems as they are. We typically work with the individual, but we also work with the systems as well. The person is observed as a part of their total life situation, and understanding not just from adding together the assessments of the individual and the environment, but rather striving for a full understanding of the complex interactions between client and all levels of the social system, as well as the meaning the client assigns to these interactions. So at the center of this point here, we've got the individual. And we recognize that the individual is a part of a family, maybe part of a school environment, maybe part of a religious community, neighborhood, workplace, whatever the case is. And those particular environments have an influence on the individual. Everybody here probably has some of these influences in their life. We may understand what the workplace does to us, or what our role is in the workplace, within the neighborhood, within our own family. Everybody has different roles and responsibilities as they play themselves out in those family matters. Further to that system is, other systems, whether it's the economic system, the government system, laws, educational system, political systems, things that are working against those systems, and that we are working within as well, as we continue to be a part of that. And then recognizing the norms and the values of the culture that we find ourselves in, and recognizing that those also have an influence and an impact. So when we're working with individuals, when you're working with people in your workplaces and in the community, we do get a sense, hopefully, of understanding who that individual is. Sometimes we have to dig deeper, whether it's through the use of assessments, whether it's through the use of case planning, whatever the tools and the resources we have to kind of understand how that person works within their own system individually, but then how they're also working within and interacting with all these other systems as they take place as well. And it's really, I think that, as we start to, not necessarily have that in our conscious mind, but just as we are trying to work with and develop case planning for individuals, or working with them, depending on where the problems are, the situations are that we find ourselves working with them, that it takes us time to kind of pause and reflect on, and make sure that we're taking not just the person into consideration, but the situations that they're dealing with and the environments that they're working within as well. Another, just trying to position my screen so that they're off to the side here. So general system theory, therefore, is a general science of wholeness, the meaning of the somewhat mystical expression, the whole is more than the sum of its parts, which I've said a few times, is simply that constitutive characteristics are not explainable from the characteristics of the isolated parts. Characteristics of the complex, therefore, appear as new or emergent. So as our friend Ludwig here in 1968 wrote in his book, he was trying to, I think, establish certain ideas that applied to virtually every scientific field. So when we looked at the ecological system as it was set out, I think it was initially used for different sciences but there was a push to kind of put it into the social sciences as well, and start to be able to understand some of these theories in terms of understanding individuals, their circumstances, and their environments better. And so as we take a look at systems theory, we have an opportunity to see that universal guidelines and principles that are applied across the sciences, across educational settings, help us to have a basis for working with and understanding individuals better in the work that we do as well. So how does systems theory apply to social work? As I've mentioned, a holistic approach to an individual's personality, choices, and challenges is important when it comes to successful social work. Like the other social sciences, the social worker must look at all factors that come together in a unique way to shape their experiences and who they are. So that brings me to some of the work that we did in the Toronto shelters. When I started there, I was the executive director for Maxwell Meehan Center and Florence Booth House. And part of what we were doing with the shelters were kind of bringing them all together under one administration. And in essence, to kind of realize that working together as a shelter system, we were stronger, we worked better than working individually. Again, the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. Recognizing that rather than having 5 voices at the time speaking into homelessness and speaking into the work that was happening in the city of Toronto from a homelessness perspective and from a shelter perspective. If we were able to present one voice, which was the Salvation Army, we would be able to have better relationships. We would be able to have better processes in place. And so that's what we aim to do. We aim to be just a whole system rather than being divided up in different ways. This logo, which we created for Toronto Housing and Homeless Supports, was really kind of taking the 5 shelters. So just going from, I guess, left to right there. Hope Shelter, Gateway, Florence Booth House, Evangeline Residence, and Maxwell Meehan Center. And bringing them together and saying, you know, as we work collectively as housing and homeless supports, we not only will be able to do more, but we'll hopefully be able to affect more change. We'll be able to learn more. We'll be able to share more. And as individuals come in contact with us, they won't just say, well, you know, I like the Gateway, but I don't like Maxwell Meehan Center. Or if I have to go to a Salvation Army shelter, I'm going to go to this one because I had a good experience there, but I don't want to go to that one. And so there were things that, you know, separately we were able to do and we were able to do well, but bringing us together as one ministry unit, it allowed us to do so much more. Our acronym that we came up with was HOME for the shelter, which stood for housing, outcomes, mission, and excellence. Kind of building off of all of those areas, recognizing that as home, we were trying to work towards finding home for people and keeping them housed as opposed to just sheltering them for a short period of time. We were trying to measure outcomes and we were trying to have systems and processes in place and being able to work consistently across the shelters so that we could measure outcomes. We could effectively evaluate and be better at what we do, but then we could also share those results and hopefully show that what we were doing was effective in terms of getting people housed and keeping them housed as well. Mission, obviously, was an important part of what we were trying to do. And we realized that we weren't doing it consistently across all of our programs. So we created a director of mission integration, Dion Oxford, who his full responsibility really was to bring the mission and make it alive across all of our programming and shelter. So we took the training and used missional training in all the work that we do. We tried to speak mission into everything that we did. But again, recognizing that separately, we weren't necessarily hitting the mark, but collectively, we were able to kind of build off of our resources and do so much more with that. And then excellence, taking, you know, excellence at the time being one of the values of the Salvation Army, not to say that we don't value excellence anymore, but it's not one of the 10 values as expressed by previous administrations. And so it allowed us to kind of create a new system that hopefully would have a better, greater impact in the work that we did across the city of Toronto. The other piece that we did was we adapted the housing first approach that was happening when working with homelessness across the country. And we used that approach to kind of guide our assessment processes, our case management processes, our data collection, and the underlying work that we did so that we could be more effective that way. And then working with the Shelter Support and Housing Administration at the City of Toronto, working with the Toronto Shelter Network, working with the Toronto Alliance to End Homelessness, understanding that, you know, in order to be influential, in order to see how a system could work at its best, it obviously interacts with other systems, and it also is a part of a greater system as well. So that was some of the ways that we used social systems theory in our work, and some of the learnings that came out of that work as well. So I want to transition into a bit of systems thinking now. We have kind of that theory as a groundwork, and I'm sorry if I'm kind of rushing through this as well, but this will be available afterwards, and if there are some questions. But I want to kind of share some thoughts from Ian DeYoung. So Ian DeYoung is somebody who works with OrgCode, an organization that works with a lot of our shelters and a lot of different shelters across North America, really, working at trying to end homelessness. And Ian One of the thinkers that he's borrowed from his name is Ralph Stacey. And Ralph Stacey has created this complexity model idea, and Ian's kind of adapted it and taken some of those ideas to look at how we can think like a system as we approach the work that we do, and we try to understand the work that is happening around us as well. So thinking like a system, first of all, whether you want to think like a system or whether you're just going about doing the work that you do, the idea is that we need to think about some of the systems pieces and how we can better engage with that. People often are busy working on their own systems without thinking how it's connected and how you can get involved on a larger level. So Ralph Stacey, with his contention that complex adaptive systems consist of a network of agents that interact with each other according to a set of rules that require them to examine and respond to each other's behavior to improve their behavior and thus the behavior of the system they comprise. So, it's one thing to go about our daily work. It's another thing to think about it. If you like Nietzsche's a whole knowing and doing kind of guy, right? We learn from our doing, and it helps feed our thinking, which we learn from what we're doing, which helps feed our thinking. And there's this continual cycle of knowing and doing. If you like Luke, faith and works, right? So it's only by faith that we're able to do the works that we do, which helps support and strengthen our faith, which helps the work that we do. So taking some time to kind of give some thought to and thinking about systems will help us to do our work better, and in terms of providing the systems and working within the systems that we do. So think of homeless and housing service providers as the network of agents. So first of all, as Stacey suggests, they have to interact with each other. In other words, they can't exist in isolation or as a silo. So hopefully I'm not telling you anything that you don't know, but the Salvation Army is often seen to be working in communities in isolation. It does happen. I've experienced it in the past. And even if it's not happening right now, it's often been, I guess, one of the criticisms of the work that the Salvation Army may do in communities as well. The Salvation Army isn't always one to work, to play well in the sandbox with others. And so recognizing that we need to work better and that we do need to work with others, I think is a good starting point when we're thinking about the systems that we're a part of and the systems that we work within. We can't work in silos. I know at times we get frustrated when we see people or DHQ or THQ or whatever the case is, working in silos, that people aren't communicating and talking to each other. And so the challenge really is recognizing how we combat that, how we work collectively, how we work collaboratively, and how we can kind of begin to be better partners and better players within the system. As a network of as an agent, what are we doing and how can we interact with each other in a better way? Second of all, is there a set of rules that are involved. Communities should create sectors of service to more clearly define what is expected from each type of service delivery, what it aims to solve, how it completes the work, the indicators we look at, and the outcomes we should expect. And that doesn't mean that we all work the same, but I guess if we're looking at it from a housing first perspective, the idea is we want to get people housed and we want to keep them housed. And so if we're working within the system with that premise, then we're all working towards that end. We're working towards that goal. We're not just sheltering people, or we're not just kind of meeting with people, or we're not just handing out food. We're engaging with individuals and we're trying to do so much more, right? It's not just about meeting that immediate need, but recognizing that within the system is designed to be doing so much more and working towards those goals in that sense. So from a shelter standpoint with homelessness, we start looking at having coordinated access. So whether it's coordinated access into housing, whether it's how we provide supports and shelter services to people. We look at common assessment tools so that we're not just, using assessment tools that are not connected to what other people are doing, right? Yeah, we have forms that we can fill out and we can get people to sign forms so that we can share information. But if we have to kind of retell the story every time we either talk to one of our community partners, or at worst, if we expect that the individuals that we're working with to have to tell their story, which is part of the way our bureaucracy is set, right? Please fill out this intake form. Please fill out this intake. Please tell us what we need to know so that you will get the support that you need. And oftentimes it's just a matter of people either telling us what they want, what we think that they think we want to hear, or they're telling us stuff and just, meaning that we're, taking the pieces that we want, but not taking the whole and realizing where the person is. Or we're working independent of some of our other partners so that, we're not able to kind of get those results and those solutions. We need to, I guess, have those sets of rules in place that if we are, and as we do work within the bureaucracy that we do, that we are capturing that information and that we are working for the best interests of those individuals. So having those rules in place is helpful for all those that are involved. Thirdly, Stacey requires these agents to examine and respond to each other's behavior. This requires critical analysis and an outward orientation to the work. We need to look at what is happening around us to best understand how we should behave. Sometimes this requires evaluation from an external partner, an external party. So, we really, I think, have to pause at times and ensure that, either with the community partners that we're working with, or even within the organization as a system that we're working with, that we are understanding our behavior, we're understanding the behaviors of others, and that we are, working together to make sure that we're all kind of holding each other accountable and working towards that end. Not all the partners in community do things the exact same way that we do things. That doesn't mean that it's wrong, but if we're working together towards a certain goal, it allows us to either call individuals on that, work with them, have conversations with them to understand that. But it really is just taking that time to evaluate and making sure that we understand that we're doing what we should be doing, understanding what people are doing, and then being able to kind of move forward with that. I think that even if we look at the accreditation process that the Salvation Army uses, not everybody is aware of or a part of those systems, but the accreditation process is often a good way of just finding out how we are working based on the standards that are in place and making sure that we're meeting those standards, making sure that our policies and procedures are where they need to be, that our behaviors are where they need to be, and it allows us to better ourselves in order to be able to continue to work and within the system as it is. And finally, the changes we make are not just about making the individual agent better, though that is part of it. It is about trying to improve the behavior of the system as a whole. So in this case, collectivism trumps individualism. Collaboration is important. When we're looking at our clients, the tendency at times is to talk about my client this or my client that, when we have to realize if we're looking at it from a systems perspective, it's not just my client. Oftentimes it's a client that's even shared within the ministry, and so it could be multiple workers that are working with a client. In some agencies where there's multiple programs, that client may be seeing different parts of the same ministry unit in different ways. And the client that we're working with more often than not is a client of other social service agencies as well. And so we have to recognize that, the work that we're doing is impacting that individual, but we're also working with other agencies and other players that are also having an impact. And we need to work with those partners in order, again, for the best interest of the client. It can become challenging at times when, maybe a different agency has a different ethos or a different way of working with people. You know, oftentimes when we're looking at harm reduction, let's say, we find ourselves at different places within the spectrum of harm reduction. It doesn't mean that it's it's bad or it's good, because in the end, it's not really about us. We're thinking about that individual. How are we providing the best level of supports? And that individual, they may, you know, they may benefit from being in an absence-based program. They may benefit from being in a supportive environment that allows them to reduce the amount of substances they use. But it may also be that they need supports that are provided, say, through safe injection sites. And so it's not always about us. More often than not, it shouldn't be about us. But how do we work with that individual? How do we best provide those levels of supports with that individual, so that individual gets where the supports and the services that they need in the work that they do? And then how do we work with them in order to make that possible? In summary, the lessons to take away from Stacey's work in thinking like a system. One is service providers are connected to a network of other service providers. We need to be aware of that. The connectivity of the service providers requires a set of rules or standards, at least something that we're all working towards and that we understand. Service providers have to reflect upon their own role and function, and then put that into the context of how to respond to other service providers. And there is shared responsibility to improve the system as a whole, instead of thinking it is just one person or one agency's job. So as we start to think like a system, it allows us to kind of even step back, hopefully, and be more objective. It's so easy to be subjective. It's so easy to, even when we're sitting with some individuals and they're not seeing things the way that we see things, sometimes it's difficult for us to take a step back and try and see things from the way that they're seeing things. And then to understand it, again, thinking about it as, you know, the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. Looking at that individual and trying to understand where that person's coming from, what that person's experiences are, what, you know, their family life was, what their church and faith experience has been, how that's impacted them, how does that continue to impact their home, their workplace, their school place, and working within all the systems where we are with things. And I think that as we start to think that way, and as we open ourselves up to even listening more, I think that we are able to kind of put ourselves in a better place to work with the individuals that we work with, and hopefully see them in a new and real way as well. Which brings us into our last section, which is like system in action. And I had mentioned that we use the outcome star, and I'm just going to talk about the outcome star as a resource. And it takes a lot of the same ideas and builds upon a lot of the same notions that maybe some of the resources that you use. But the outcome star is designed to support both the client and the worker to help move the client towards their end goal, whether that is self-reliance or maximizing well-being and independence. It's designed to measure the progress that those individuals have made towards that end goal. And it's designed to increase consistency in ways of working across the organization. So I mentioned that we started using the outcome star as part of our processes as a tool when working with the shelters. And so we were able to use the outcome star as part of our assessment package, working at any of our shelters. So if a client went to the Gateway, it wasn't as if they were doing something different than what they were doing at Maximilian Center. If they went to Evangeline, they could pick up on the same assessment tool, case planning tool, case management tool that they were doing at Florence Booth House. And so wherever individuals happen to be, we were focusing on them. We were focusing on what their goals were, what their interests were, and devising the plans based on that. And this was a tool that, you know, we could actually send over to the other shelter. And because the individual, the client that we're working with, is engaged in that process already, it's not as if they have to relearn another tool or if they have to understand a different process. but it's a system that they're already engaged with. The other thing about the Outcome Star is it's based on the journey of change. So it comes down to that individual level. Again, if we're looking at how we can better support and work with that individual, the best thing is to understand how to better work with that individual as they change, as they develop, as they grow in their own work and in their own environments. So the Outcome Star, supporting and measuring change. First of all, provides meaningful outcomes information. It empowers service users and supports them in making changes. And it promotes a consistent, holistic, assets-based approach to key work. I first came across the Outcome Star in 2006. I had an opportunity to be a part of a homelessness conference in the UK. And St. Mungo's is a homeless shelter that works there. And they were developing the Outcome Star with the support of some consultants in the community. And they developed what was called a homelessness star. And subsequently, a number of other stars were created to support the work that happens in our work as well. So there's, a substance use star, or, whatever situations people may, unemployment, money management, whatever, developmental disabilities. You could almost take any of the different areas, and they develop stars off of the same kind of line thinking to help support people as they move, as they develop, as they move towards self-reliance in that capacity, in that sense. So this is the star. It's a 10-point star. I guess it was different points on the stars. We'd have to question whether it's satanic or however we go with it. But in this sense, it's a 10-point star, and we're able to kind of see how it goes. It goes from, each of the scales go from 1 to 10. And the ideas is, again, based on the journey of change, that people are able to kind of identify where they are on the star and make changes through working with the worksheets that they have and through the supports through the caseworker to move from, say, a 2 to a 3, a 3 to a 4, or whatever the case might be. And it's in all of these areas, recognizing that when we're looking at, if you're looking at a homeless individual, it's not just about any one particular thing. In all cases, it's about housing, right? Homeless individuals need housing. The people that you're working with, they may be living in poverty, they may be dealing with certain situations. Quite often they're dealing with situations where housing is not either sustainable or they're precariously housed. But that's an issue which we need to kind of make sure that is a part of our discussions and where we are with things. But when you're dealing with homelessness, housing is an issue, income is an issue, and it's an issue about social supports as well. And with every individual, it's different social supports. Not every homeless individual is a drug addict. Not every homeless individual is dealing with mental health issues. There are a number of individuals who do have addictions and substance use issues, and there are those that have mental health issues. And even then, if somebody has a mental health issue, is it a severe mental health issue? Is it, is it dealing with a level of anxiety? Is it dealing with, other issues that come out of things? Are they medicated? How do they work with things? And so we recognize that not everybody is in the same space, but quite often we try and make the solutions the same, right? We try and just kind of push people through our systems and our processes, thinking that, one size fits all. And the reality is every individual is different, and we need to kind of work from that standpoint. And so this is where the Outcome Star plays its role. The 10 points here, one is on offending. I love the language as well. It's not about corrections and justice services. Not to say that that's a bad, it's what we do, it's how we work with things, but it's offending. It's motivation and taking responsibility. It's self-care and living skills. It's managing money. It's social networks and relationships. It's drug and alcohol misuse. Again, this is another one that I love. People use substances. Doesn't make them, inherently bad or doesn't make them homeless. There are a lot of people that I know who have housing and have, issues with drugs and alcohol. The challenge is how they use it, but it's also understanding at times the misuse of it and how we can work with individuals. So again, I love the language there. Physical health, emotional and mental health, meaningful use of time, and managing tenancy and accommodation. So taking all those things that we know about individuals and kind of breaking it down so it's like, you need a house, go get housed, or understanding that maybe they need more supports, they don't need many supports. There are individuals who you can give them a listing and say, here's a housing register, and they're going to be homeless for a short period of time and they're going to find housing. There are other individuals who have been chronically homeless for 15 years. It's not as easy as handing them a registry and saying, you need to go and you need to do this. It's worth working with individuals to find out where they are, understanding where they are, and working with them so that they're able to make those steps forward. So this is kind of like how it looks as it's used by both the worker and by the client. So one of the connecting kind of diagrams in there would be the workers, and the other would be the clients. So both the client and the worker kind of identify where they happen to be on the star. It may be a matter, meaningful use of time, that there's agreement. Both of you agree you're at a 4. And so as you start to case plan, what does that mean? If you're using the manual, and I'll have one of those available to you. But it's, what does it mean to go from a 4 to a 5? If there's agreement between the worker and the client, obviously the conversation is a little bit easier. And recognizing that any of the work that we do with individuals is a conversation. It's not do this, don't do that, right? There may be some distance, spread out in terms of some of the other ones. Drug and alcohol misuse for this person. They may feel that they're at a 3. You may feel that they're at a 5, or vice versa. And they may need to kind of work towards how they get to a better place of self-reliance. And that's really what this is. And it's really what the journey of change is. It's identifying where you are, setting goals for where you want to be, and then what the plan is to move towards that. And so as a collaborative process, it's sitting down and it's using a tool to look at the whole person, focusing on the client's potential, not just focusing on the problems. And it's really intended to empower the people, showing them what change looks like and what the next steps are for them as well. Again, looking at just the scales, in this situation, if we're looking at drug and alcohol misuse, the scales are kind of like in the bottom corner, the red, which is stuck. The next section is accepting help, 3 to 4. Believing is the next section. Learning, 7 and 8, and then self-reliance, 9 and 10. The interesting thing about, even a tool such as this is that even if you were to use it for yourself, we're not all at a 10. Claire might be at a 10 on every section there, but we're not all at a 10. We are at different places, and if we do this assessment at different times, we're at different places. I'm sure that if we did it today, interestingly enough, 2 years after the first COVID case was seen in Canada, we might be at a different place in some of the things that we're looking at. We might be at a different place with our own emotional and mental health than we were 2 years ago. We might be at a different place with substance use than we were 2 years ago because of our emotional and mental health. We may not use our time as meaningfully as we can or as we have in the past. And I guess it's again, thinking about the whole as opposed to the parts. There's reasons for that. There's context for that. We don't come through a pandemic without change, without being different than maybe we were in the past as we kind of go through these experiences. And even, that's just the environment that we're in is the pandemic. A lot of us have gone through, moving, changing jobs, their family situations have changed. And in some cases, all those things happen for individuals. And, you know, we have to kind of, again, it's an opportunity to have the conversation, to see where people are, to understand where people are, sometimes even in the context of understanding where we are ourselves. But then being able to, you know, as we're able to identify what that movement would look like going from this stage to that stage, or from this step to that step, and having the opportunity for the individual to identify for themselves, you know, this is what I see this as, you know, like if somebody is in that, you know, that accepting help stage, you know, you're able to do so much more with them than if they're in a stuck stage. If they're in a believing stage, their goal setting, their action plans are probably going to be different. And so this is a tool which really just emphasizes, again, where the individual is, who the individual is, and what needs to happen in working with that individual to move them from one step to another. From a success standpoint, it doesn't mean, again, that everybody is at, and there are some situations where, you know, if we're talking about drug and substance use, it may be a lifetime, right? If you talk to addicts, they are more than likely going to be talking to you about the fact that they continue to be an addict. I have a cousin who I only came to know her when I was working in the shelters in Toronto, but she was trying to get off the street. She was an addict, and she came to visit with me. And again, I didn't even know she existed. I knew her dad, and my dad and her dad were cousins. And, you know, she had gone through this period of time where she was living on the streets. And as she became pregnant with her first child, she wanted to make a change, and she was able to get off the streets. She just had her second child. We are continue to keep in touch. But the amazing thing is that she still struggles with substance use. She still struggles with addiction. And yet, because of the supports that she has in place, not because of me, I can't take credit for any of this, but she was able to connect to her local Salvation Army. She was able to attend moms and tots camps. She was able to find stable housing. She was able to find stable work. And she's continued to, you know, build her life around her kids. She's been able to build her life around other areas in her life. And she's continuing on that journey to be in a better place. I say, you know, I bring her up as an example because she still continues to post things on social media about being an addict and about how difficult life is. But she continues to also stand in the strength of that to say, you know, but I'm not going back, and I'm not going to find myself where I happen to be in that sense as well. So again, as we work with individuals, as we see those changes, as we work with the resources, you know, we see that people are able to move and to make changes in their life as well. And as we come to the top of the hour, which is kind of the area that I was aiming for, kind of coming to the end of the presentation. But I'll take if there are any questions or if there are any comments or anything along that way, and hopefully able to kind of respond to those things as well. But I want to leave you with a quote from Martin Buber. And I have a friend who calls him the boobs, because whenever I bring up Martin Buber, she's like, oh yeah, the boobs. Anyway, so I understand how terrible that might sound. Yeah, anyways, I'll forget it. Maybe that's why she says it that way, but we won't tell her that I use this in the presentation. And hopefully the recording has stopped, but it probably hasn't. So we'll take it out from there. Anyways, B-U-B-E-S, the bubes. Let's change it that way. Anyways, from his book, I and Thou. I've totally thrown all credibility out the window at this point in time. But Martin Buber says this: if we go on our way and meet a man who has advanced towards us and has also gone on his way, we know only our part of the way, not his. His we experience only in the meeting. Of the complete relational event we know and the knowledge of life lived, our going out to that relation, our part of the way. That's all that we know. The other part only comes upon us. We do not know it. It comes upon us in that meeting. But we strain ourselves if we speak of it as though it were something beyond the meeting. You know, if we're going to work with people who are marginalized, we need to come to where they are. We need to understand where, you know, quite often people try and move people in from the margins as opposed to centering the work that we do towards the margins. But it's about meeting people where they are. It's about understanding where they're coming from and where they're at, and then working with them from that standpoint, as opposed to, yeah, you need to come this way and you need to work in it this way. We only know our part of the way and our experience and the work that we do. But we need to move that conversation towards them, and we need to be able to work with them in order to be able to help them move forward if that's what they choose to, and that's what they decide to do. And I believe I will stop sharing, and I'll kind of bring it back to this.
All right. Thank you so much, Bradley. Very informative presentation, lots to consider. We do have some questions if you're willing to take those now.
Sure.
So I'll start at the top. This is from Peter Kim. Peter asked this during your systems thinking section. So the question was, how is systems thinking different from collaboration and collective impact?
I think it's the same. I think that it's just use of terminology in that sense, like collaboration. And again, I think that the thinking like a systems is really, you know, the idea is to not just do what we always do, but taking the time to pause and to refresh. We can collaborate, but sometimes in our collaboration, we expect people to change. We expect other things to happen. You know, the collaboration often is what's in it for me, as opposed to how can I collaborate with you? How can I do something for you? So if we're thinking about even, you know, most of our programs have space in their buildings. And quite often the people that we collaborate with are looking for a space. So maybe it's not about what's in it for us. It's about providing space, providing opportunities, providing resources for individuals, for other agencies, so that we're a part of that collaboration. But I think that too often when we think about collaboration, or when we think about you know, how we partner with other people, it's about what's in it for us. And then again, we don't play well in the sandbox when we take that approach. But if we kind of look at it as what can we bring to this, maybe we're not going to benefit, we're not going to be the one who benefits the most or benefit the same, but we're able to partner, we're able to contribute, we're able to be, you know, it may not be a financial thing because we like our money and we like to use our resources, you know, for the things that we feel need to be done as well. But it's about those other resources. Sometimes it's in kind. Sometimes it's, you know, just how we can use our time and our energy. And sometimes it's about, you know, how we can be that better partner in that sense. So when we start to think like a system, it's not just about us, but it's thinking about the system as a whole, recognizing our place in it, how we can be an agent, and how we can work with that as well.
Peter, did you want to follow up?
Yeah, can I just follow up really quickly?
Sure.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying about the collaboration and the nuance in terms of semantics of the naming it. But one point that you did make was the accountability piece and the standardization with the collective impact and all those other collaborative efforts. We still keep our own house in order, right? We do things our own way, but we here in Grand Prairie have started integrated coordinated access, where we're doing the same measurements, where we're looking at the individual as well as being part of that process. So allowing the lived experience and living experience to be part of that solution, as opposed to just doing it for them. So nothing without us is the idea. And then so that system change is definitely happening here.
Right.
But it started with collaboration. It started with collective impact thinking, and now has moved to the systems change, which is a lot more about the whole, like you were saying, about the whole cake, than just two partners working together or two or three agencies getting along because their EDs are happy with each other. You know, it's a little bit more than that right now, and adding that element of the end user in the discussion makes a big difference in how we move forward with this systems change, because we're not changing the system for our benefit,
Right.
it's from their perspective. And so I think that's part and parcel of what I'm hearing from you, is that that kind of change has to happen, starting with dialogue, but working towards a whole new framing, a paradigm shift in the way we do things.
And it's not easy. I don't have to tell you that, because we have a whole set of, values. We have, a new vision statement as an organization. When I say we, the Salvation Army, we have a mission statement, right? We have oftentimes in part of our discussions with people, Jesus Christ, which is not always part of the mission of other agencies that we work with. And it's recognizing where those differences are, and recognizing that, we need to still work together for the benefits of the individuals. I remember when I was working in Peel with the shelters in Peel, the Unitarian minister did not like what we did at all, but he was thinking of the old, you had to listen to your sermon before you had your meal, right? The old where you had to sit through the service before we would feed you. And so that was the approach that he was taking based on his previous experiences. It took a long time. I can't even say that we ever actually had a working relationship. We never really had a positive relationship. But it was based on just, different understandings, different approaches, and even of how we do things. But it's putting those pieces aside and saying, collectively, we need to be working with individuals. How do we best work with, when we talk about something like whether working with the LGBTQ community or whether we're working with harm reduction, there are things in the Salvation Army that sometimes make those conversations difficult, whether it's the beliefs that people have of us, whether it's the change that the organization has gone through, or how we approach working with individuals, and recognizing, again, it's not about us, it's about the people that we're working with and how do we work with them. So it's a lot of work, and that's why it's, when you're looking at Stacey, it's complexity, right? I was actually looking through some resources the other day for something else, and realized that even the organization, before it got to Mobilize 2.0, was going through complexity surveys. They were looking at the complexities of the systems and the processes that the Salvation Army is and goes through, recognizing just how complicated we make things at times and how complex we are as an organization. And it's working within that, and then also working beyond that, in order for us to be able to do that. So it's good things that are happening in Lethbridge. It's good.
All right, we'll keep moving. Our next question comes from Beverly Daniels, Bermuda. And Beverly is asking, how does this conversation apply to a situation where the Salvation Army is partnering with another charity to network to improve the plight of homeless in Bermuda? And Beverly's here if you need more context, Brad.
Yep. No, I see Beverly. Hi, Beverly. That's a good question. Like, again, not-for-profits don't, and even if we're talking about other faith groups, that we're not all on the same page. We're not all working towards the same accreditation standards. We're not all working towards the same, soup, soap, and salvation, whatever the case might be. But when we start to, I guess the common piece, just like with any working relationship or with any relationship, you look for the commonalities and keeping it simple. And looking at, where do we have agreement? Where do we have certainties? Where can we simplify matters? Where can we talk about those individuals? And it's about, I think, still holding true to what the Salvation Army does in Bermuda, recognizing what the partnership or what the collaboration is meant to be doing, and then what the individuals that you're serving what's in it for them and how do we best serve them.
Mhm.
Bermuda's not a huge country. So, you know,
Mhm.
the opportunities that I've had to go to Bermuda, you know, it's, you know, the people that are there, everybody knows everybody.
Mhm.
Like, you know, like even the people that I met at the Harbor Light, they often would not sit out front of the Harbor Light because everybody walked by and knew who they
Mhm.
were. And
Mhm.
so, you know, it's not even just, you know, kind of keeping,
Yeah.
keeping things that way, but everybody knows everybody. And so how do you best work with those individuals?
Mhm.
How do you best support those individuals? And being able to think about it from a system standpoint,
Mhm.
not just as, you know, again, what's in it for us from the Salvation Army standpoint. So
Yeah.
that's
The key challenge, if I will, is that this is a new charity that has just emerged, and there are those amongst us within the Salvation Army who are concerned that there will be competition between this new charity and us, competition for charitable dollars, competition for who will be sent to which homeless home, you know, which where will we house them? Will they come to us or will we go to them? So they have reached out to me and asked me if I would be a part of their their think tank as they establish who they are. And I'm quite happy to do that. But, and I am, it involves my meeting with them and so on. However, over here, you have those people who are really concerned, like, oh my goodness, did you hear there's a new charity? What is this going to do to the Salvation Army? So it's the conversation is very timely for me.
Yeah, and I think that's important. I think it's also like it's important to recognize that competition isn't a bad thing, right? Like we're all pretty much any of our centers are competing for dollars, either, you know, even Red Shield dollars, if we're organizationally speaking, or funders, whether they're supporting that shelter or supporting this agency or that agency. And I think that that's where, you know, we need to evaluate, where we need to have outcomes, where we need to agree. And even if we're all working towards the same, having the competition isn't a bad thing as long as the individuals are being better served, right? We don't have all the answers. You know, we've been around for 150 years doing what we do, but we don't have all the answers. And I think that, you know, as much as we open ourselves up to competition, whether it's friendly or whether it's serious, and you know, maybe it's not as bad as succession, where the competition just takes out families and everything else. But it's also it's an opportunity for us to better ourselves as well and to learn from that process. It's good that you're invited into that piece, and it's good that you're able to share your knowledge. And again, that's you know, collateral. That's capital, social capital that you're able to even share with them, and they'll continue to look towards you and to work towards that. And even if the government decides, you know what, we're going to go in a different direction, we're going to provide, you know, in Peel last summer, we lost 2 shelters because the government in Peel, the region of Peel, decided to go with other agencies to run those shelters. You know, we need to then kind of regroup with the work that we're doing, and we need to kind of shift gears and recognize that we're still there and we're still doing work. But maybe it's better for the clients. Maybe it's better for the community. Maybe it's, you know, having other voices speaking into that. That's not necessarily, it's a difficult thing, but it's not necessarily a bad thing. So it's good that this is hopefully supportive, and, you know, reach out anytime if I can help, if you have any other questions.
Beverly did have a quick follow-up in the chat, which is just, is there a manual to go with this? This is during the outcome star section. And then it looks great, but seems to overlap with some of the Pathway of Hope assessments.
Yeah, and you know, I recognize Matt and I were talking about the Pathway of Hope assessment as well, and that's a 5-point scale. This is just another resource. It's another thinking. It's a, you know, if you find yourself stuck maybe with where you are, maybe one of the other resources, here's another tool. You know, a toolkit is just that. It's a number of tools. Over the years, you know, I think Don just left, but Don Halsey, he's my brother-in-law. So I would always borrow tools from Don because he had the toolkit. He had the toolboxes that had all of, you know, so for me, it's you need 3 screwdrivers, right? No, not
Ah.
necessarily. You need so many other things that go along with it. But it's having those other tools available to you, other resources, and kind of just using those as you need to and as you can.
My question actually, very quickly, was around sharing with the other collaborative, something that they might be able to use. So that star it almost looked like it could stand alone with proper training. Yeah.
Yep. No, it's a very good tool to use. And yeah, there are resources that, I did make the user manual available. So Matt will be sending it out to everybody. But there's also, you go online and you look up the Outcome Star. Because it was a consultant agency, there was another agency that was funding it. There are multiple ones that are out there, but you can kind of find the resource and then kind of follow up with some internet searches as well and find what you need.
Awesome. Lydia was asking if she could have a copy of the star, so we'll make sure that the manual gets out to everyone. She also notes or asks whether the Salvation Army has approached or is, I guess, in conversation with the Toronto Real Estate Board for a grant, as she knows that they give them out for housing-based charities, and she used to be on the committee there. So
Okay.
I guess that's just something, Brad, if you and Lydia want to connect on that.
Sure. Yeah, it's a follow-up. I know that, we have had some conversations over the years. There are times when we work with the Real Estate Board and people who are associated with it to either find properties or to help us in terms of selling properties or working in that sense, or even just understanding the housing market and where we go with that. The financial piece is interesting. I don't know if our development department is aware of it, but that's something that I can easily reach out to Ricky and see if that's something that they're aware of. But yeah, you can always flip me out an email. I'm on salvationarmy.ca. So if you want to send an email, I can always follow up with you that way. Or send it to Matt. Matt will connect you.
Absolutely. We had a couple comments. Janet from Lindsay just mentioned that Org Code has some fantastic materials for free, and I think that's one of the ones you were speaking to, right, Brian?
Yeah. Ian DeYoung is Ian DeYoung started off working with the City of Toronto and ended up going off on his own and finding that his possibilities to do more when you're not encumbered by city bureaucracy. So he's done some amazing things in the area of homelessness.
We also have Laura from Barrie mentioning that the Homeless Hub is another fantastic resource, and they provide training. Yep.
So I'm going to do a little name drop here. So Stephen Gates, who is part of the Homeless Hub and created the Homeless Hub, he was also with me in 2006 when we did this conference in the UK. It was actually a 3-country conference, and so I was actually able to be one of the Canadian contingents. And I met Stephen Gates as we went there, but he and I came across the Outcome Star on that same trip, and so started searching on how we could use it in our fields. It took us a little while, but one of the things that he actually was talking to me about at that point was starting up the Homeless Hub and the think tank that goes alongside of that, and a lot of the work that's come out of York University as a result of that. So shout out to Stephen Gates and Homeless Hub. Excellent resource if you're looking for resources.
And the last one was just a comment from Maggie. While you were speaking about collaboration, she just agreed that sometimes instead of reinventing the wheel, we can offer our space to help other agencies help the vulnerable.
Yeah, I agree. And again, it's a shifting of thinking, right? Like I agree, we're very territorial and we put boundaries on who and what we can do and who and what we can serve and all those kind of things. But I think that when we open ourselves up to what's in it for other people, not just what's in it for us. And again, if we come down to that common client, that person that we're serving, how are we able to use our resources, our gifts beyond ourselves to be able to provide better supports and services for those individuals. Those clients, they may get better served elsewhere. They may never step inside our doors again, but they may also become housed and they may become sustainably housed. and they may, to make that change in their own journey that they wouldn't necessarily have got if they had continued to kind of be with us and to stick with us where they happen to be. So I agree, the collaboration piece, as challenging as it can be, it's essential. We can't do it all, even though sometimes we think we can, but we can't do it all. And we need other people working alongside of us, and all levels of government and all community people and everything we can go with.
Awesome. That's everything I have from the chat. I don't know. There's always a danger in throwing it open. I don't know if anyone's been waiting to jump in. Does anyone have a quick question for Brad before we finish? All right.
Excellent.
Yeah, seems like you covered all the bases then. Well, Bradley mentioned his email address and everything. If you do have something, I can't guarantee, he's a busy person, so I'm sure he can get back to you in a certain amount of time, but might take some time just depending on what he's got going on. But we'll definitely get the resources out there. He's offered his PowerPoint slides and that outcome star manual. We'll definitely distribute that. Yeah, any final thoughts, Bradley, before I close it up?
Nope, okay. I'm good. I think
I'm
all talked out.
You were great. You're more than good. Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate your time, Bradley, and everything you've offered to this conversation and the resources. Definitely a lot of good materials for people to consider and to take these learnings and apply them to their own situations, and for us to begin thinking like a system and to do better with that as we navigate the individual client situations and the people that we're supporting in communities. So thank you so much for the resources and your time and presentation today. I want to thank everyone who came and attended, asked questions, made comments, and engaged with the presentation. Really appreciate your time attending these monthly learnings, and I hope they're adding value.